I like transportation. Transportation is good, it gets people from point A to point B. I really like mass transit. Buses, trains, streetcars, all of it. Big fan. So I'm really bummed to be against Prop 479, the half-cent sales tax that goes to transportation in Maricopa County. This was supposed to be a positive video. I literally started this process with the intention of picking up a megaphone and yelling, "Go vote for Prop 479," but after looking at the process and looking at the actual contents of Prop 479, I've changed sides. Consider me an opponent of Prop 479. That puts me in a minority position, I realize. Okay, apparently a very minority position. 68% support? Yikes. Oh, and it's not just individual voters who support this bill.
Mayors from across the valley joined Governor Hobbs and business leaders to voice their support of Prop 479, which would fund freeways and roads, as well as arterial projects and public transit like the bus service.
So, widespread support from mayors of Maricopa County, the governor, and the people of Maricopa County. So I'm living the Calvin and Hobbes comic where having principles and standing on them have no effect on the outcome. Because the opposition contained in this video is not going to have any effect. But to quote another comic, it doesn't matter what the press says, doesn't matter what the politicians or the mob say, doesn't matter if the whole country decides that something wrong is something right. This nation was founded on one principle above all else, the requirement that we stand up for what we believe, no matter the odds or the consequences. When the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the whole world, no, you move. And before anyone else points it out, yes, Captain America does end up dead at the end of this story arc. Nevertheless, I stand against Prop 479 for a lot of reasons. The main one being what it represents. Proposition 479 should represent the collective will of the people of Maricopa County coming together to enact a tax that goes towards specific transportation needs. But that's not what it is. Prop 479 was created through compromise with state-level Republicans, and because of that, it is horribly compromised. You see, Republicans don't really believe in mass transit. I don't really know why, but they don't.
I'm one of those ones who's talking about that likes a certain amount of transit, but when I consider transit, light rail and trolley is not any part of transit. Or shouldn't be any part of transit. When I look at some of the things that have happened, like in Mesa, for example, where they bought 5 trolleys for $5.5 million, they could have bought 66 buses for that. And those buses, they're not locked down to a path like these transit things are. Like light rails and your trolleys are. Those things are locked down. If something wants to move, you got to tear up the roads all over again. $245 million per mile. That's outrageous. Outrageous. There's no way that you can ever convince me that that is something that the east side or the west side wants. Nobody wants this except the people that are building it. So if we want buses. I'm good with buses. Buses can move around. Phoenix could have bought. They just went out and bought those 100 electric buses. That's way better than light rail. Way better than light rail. Even though I think that's a waste of money. Still, it's a far cry better than light rail.
Yeah, I watched a bunch of the debate from 2023, and what Goth Colonel Sanders is saying is a common sentiment on the Republican side. Buses good, light rail bad. And to briefly address his objections on cost, light rail and trolley move more people and require much less maintenance than buses, which wear out much faster. Also, putting tracks down, while expensive, encourages development instead of what was implied, which was that light rail drives out development. And it's not hard to prove. Pretty easy, in fact. Using Google Maps Street View, which has archived street views, we'll be able to see the development of city blocks around the light rail tracks. No, the correlation of these being built around the tracks is not causation, but it's definitely not a repellent, which is what was implied by Interview with a Vampire's Lestat if it was filmed by Sherwood Schwartz. To give credit where credit is due, I'm stealing this bit from CityNerd where he uses Google Street View to show development along mass transit. Go watch his Phoenix video from a month ago, it was really good. Link in the description. Let's start with 101 West Jefferson Street in 2007, the heart of downtown Phoenix. You can see the light rail tracks at the bottom. Now let's fast forward 17 years and see if people moved away. In June 2024, I count 5 new tall buildings going up along the light rail route. I'm not counting the CVS building, I do have standards. Republicans said people would run away from light rail. Instead, it seems like they've gotten a bit of an upgrade? Okay, sorry. I'll try to avoid those. Maybe this is an outlier. Let's try 10 West University Drive down in Tempe near Arizona State University 17 years ago. Ugly, sprawly, miserable. Ugh. Time travel powers, activate. Nice. That's what we in the biz call a glow-up. Let's try one more, 498 Ash Avenue. Whole right side of the screen is empty ground. There's the light rail track. Okay, let's set the time circuits to 2024 and hit 88 miles an hour, and it seems like the quickest way to develop an area seems to build light rail tracks through it. That whole right side of the track seems to have filled right up. You know how I said that was the last one? Well, I want to do at least one more. 1101 Washington Street. In 2009, looks fine, and now in 2024, boom, development. I can do this all day. I've even listed where I did this so you can see I spread it out over the whole system, and it's not just downtown Phoenix. I'm not saying that it's impossible that people will move away from light rail, but it seems unlikely. And I've provided very visual, if anecdotal, evidence that the opposite seems to be happening. Most people and businesses seem to be moving towards light rail, not away from it. Which makes it a bit concerning that Republicans are using Prop 479 to try and defund any expansion of the light rail system. Because Prop 479 restricts the people of Maricopa County from using any of the tax to expand the light rail system. Further, any maintenance on light rail is restricted to 3.5% of all funds from Prop 479. And this tax lasts for 20 years. So fixing it really isn't an option. If this passes, it's the law for the next 20 years. Which seems like an issue when Maricopa County just passed 100 straight days of 100-degree weather. A good mass transit system seems like a great way to combat climate change. But that isn't the only way this is compromised. I'd even argue it's not the worst way Prop 479 is compromised. Here's something you won't hear in any other discussion about Prop 479. It's about the bill that put Prop 479 on the bill, SB 1102. SB 1102 did a lot of things besides put Prop 479 on the ballot. For example, who decides how the tax money is spent within the parameters of the law once it is collected? For all this talk of a half-cent sales tax, who decides how it's spent? Under the Maricopa Association of Governments, which binds small towns to large towns in Maricopa County, the Transportation Policy Committee speaks on transportation issues. It decides how Prop 479 is going to be spent. It's made up of who you think it is, some mayors, some councilors, a member of the State Transit Board, blah blah blah. But there's also a few people on there you wouldn't expect to be on it. For example, representatives from trucking companies, asphalt companies, and a real estate company? How did this happen? Wouldn't these people be fundamentally compromised by their business interests? Wouldn't the real estate companies be motivated to build highways out to their new suburbs? Wouldn't trucking companies be motivated to build new highways for their trucks to run on? Wouldn't asphalt companies be motivated to build new highways because that's how they make money? Yes, yes, and double yes. All of these groups would be motivated to behave in a manner counter to public interest by the desire for profits and government money. But to answer how this happened, it's the law. Under current law, the largely Republican state legislature gets to appoint 6 business people to the Transportation Policy Committee. And SB 1102 expands upon this. If I do the math right, and no guarantees on this because the bill is not written very clearly, there will be 29 members of the Transportation Policy Committee under SB 1102, 18 of which will be members of the Maricopa Association of Governments. One will be someone who represents resilient interests appointed by the governor, and the other 10 will be appointed by the Republican legislature. Yes, Republican legislators tacked on 4 more seats to be appointed by them. So I've got to ask, at a certain point, when is local transit policy being controlled by local government officials, and when is it just being controlled by business interests working through state-level Republicans? Because that's what it looks like to me. Bringing this back to Prop 479, I think the defunding of light rail expansion and the manipulation of the Transportation Policy Committee would be enough to convince anyone to vote no on it. And I can hear you saying, won't that discontinue the tax? No. The tax will continue until December 2025. The legislative session in 2025 has plenty of time to pass a clean renewal of the transit tax. But history sock, won't Republicans just refuse to pass it until it's larded up with nonsensical anti-democratic nonsense just like last time? I don't think so. I think Republicans have every reason to be afraid of this sales tax expiring as much as the people in Maricopa County do. I'll allow David Livingston, a legislative Republican, to explain it.
So that means in 18 months, Prop 400 ends outright, and no more collection of sales tax, and no more investment dollars. So for those of the folks that live outside of Maricopa, because this is a Maricopa tax, why is that so important for you to vote yes on this bill? If Maricopa doesn't have this half-cent sales tax, which is a continuation of what we have now, then the members that live in Maricopa, the elected officials, will be demanding money to do projects. And we spend money inside Maricopa with general fund dollars, that will be less money available to outside of Maricopa. This is truly a critical vote, a policy vote for the state of Arizona and economic development. I really think it's that important, and I want you to know that.
See, if the tax expires, all the road projects in Maricopa County that the tax would have paid for, well, now the state's now on the hook for. Every rural local government now has a lot more competition when it comes to pitching road projects. A little selfish when it comes to arguments, but I found the most honest arguments in politics come from a place of self-interest. And believe me, David Livingston knows a little something about self-interest. He snuck a provision into SB 1102 that changed the speed limit in Maricopa County on highways because he didn't want to drive slow when going into work. I don't know what to tell you. Republicans are horrible people. And I haven't even touched on the really wacky stuff in SB 1102, the bill that put Prop 479 on the ballot. Like trying to prevent a light rail extension from being built near the state capitol, or putting up a bunch of new red tape to prevent bike lanes from being built. Prop 479 is repellent to me, and it's everything wrong with politics. But I get why it has such a broad base of support. I get it. I know what's happening in the broader transit world. I know what the fiscal cliff is, and know what other transit systems are suffering through. For example, in Memphis.
First at 10 on your news leader, the Memphis Area Transit Authority held a budget meeting tonight, just a day after the city of Memphis finalized its budget. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Greg Hurst.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Skurlock. Even after being allotted $30 million, MATA is still struggling. WREG's Brian Ditlake was at that meeting. And Brian, do leaders have a plan to turn that big bus around?
Well, Stephanie, Greg, the short answer is no.
In a world where transit systems across the U.S. are falling apart from lack of funding, Maricopa County has a chance to renew a funding source that has a lot of annoying and nitpicky preconditions that were forced on them by state Republicans who don't care anything about transit or anything else in Maricopa County. But all the money that would have gone towards light rail expansion will more or less be preserved for running bus services. And I understand why every person with a position of responsibility is taking this funding, warts and all, and moving on. But I disagree. That's not what's best for the people of Maricopa County, and that's a terrible way to run a government. In my opinion, the best option is to vote this down and go back to the negotiating table. Republicans have already admitted that they want this tax so they don't have to fund road improvements in Maricopa County at the state level. I say take that probability and the very real chance that Republicans lose one or both houses of the legislature in 2024 to leverage a better deal. This tax doesn't expire until December 2025. The 2025 legislature can still do something about it, because there is almost zero chance this gets renegotiated any time before 2045 when it's up for renewal again. And I'm not a climate scientist, or even a good science student, but with climate change coming, does Maricopa County have that kind of time? Because I don't think it does. I'm History Sock and vote no on Prop 479.